All right. Well, we have a small crowd, but it's a quality crowd, and that's what's important. And I just want to say I purposely picked a top today that looked like a tablecloth, just for the theme of our talk. And the theme is the really important issue of family dinner. And I can tell you that the research shows that there is no more powerful and important thing you can do for your kids' development and self-esteem than home-cooked family dinners. And this beautiful book is all about that. So let me introduce our two stellar guests. Here's the book, by the way. It's gorgeous. Author Sarah Waldman, right here. Yes, let's hear it for her. She's a food writer, recipe developer, mom of 2 young boys. She was born in New England. She moved to Martha's Vineyard full-time 6 years ago. Sarah was destined to be a cookbook author, and I say this because she regularly invented cooking shows as a child with her sister, and her mom, with an old-fashioned camcorder, recorded them, so they must have been pretty damn good. She describes herself as a health-focused home cook. Now, all those words have very specific meanings, and we're going to ask her about that. And Feeding a Family is her second book. On my right, the wonderful Liz Cecil, the photographer for this book. You've seen her work all over this island, publications and newspapers here, but also in Bon Appetit and Savour and the Wall Street Journal. And when she isn't shooting, you can find her in her kitchen baking or at Squibnocket Beach surfing. Liz is also a year-round resident of MV, so let's welcome them both. Should I stand up here or should I sit down with you guys? I'm going to come sit down now. All right, we'll share. Or I don't even need it, actually. Can you hear me? Yeah, everybody can hear me. Nobody's ever called me soft-spoken. And it's not even on. Okay, so Sarah.
Hello.
Explain what you mean by health focus. Okay. Explain, is the mic on? Okay. Explain what you mean by health focused and explain why you describe yourself as a home cook and not a chef.
Okay. Well, the home cook part, I think I'm not trained in any culinary fashion. And I'm a home cook in the fact that I'm self-taught, and I really feel like my culinary job, quote unquote, is cooking 3 to 10 meals a day for my family. And I feel like I was influenced by home cooks. I mean, my childhood wasn't extraordinary in any culinary way, but I was surrounded by home-cooked food. My mom was a teacher, and she would come home and we would have really kind of classic things like broccoli with cheddar cheese melted on top of it, or she would make stir fry, and I mean, nothing fancy, but we were always cooking dinner together. And both of my grandmothers as well weren't extraordinary chefs, but they always, one of my grandmothers is from Sweden, so she would have all these classics. She'd bring stollen to Christmas dinner. She would have her Anna Dama bread. She would, it was just always a part of our family. We're home cooks, but it wasn't, it was never fancy or showy. And so like you mentioned me and my sister doing the cooking shows, I think just from an early age, I was attracted to that kind of comfort and creativity inside your own kitchen. And I grew up outside of Boston, so when I was homesick from school, I would watch PBS because we didn't have cable, and I'd watch Julia Child and The Frugal Gourmet and Marianne Esposito, who did Ciao Italia, and I just that's all I wanted to do.
I think one of the best recommendations for a cookbook is from home cooks, as opposed to restaurateurs or restaurant chefs, because that's not how you want to cook at home. You want to, and you're writing completely from your own experience, trying to feed 2 little boys, your family. Talk about health focused, and that seems like you hedged a little bit because you don't want to. You're not going all the way to talk about health and healthy ingredients, but you're saying health focused. So explain that.
Sure. Well, I think you're right too in that I think I can trust home cooks a little bit more, going back to that point. I mean, it's the life I do live. I'm not trying to trying to fake it. So I did, I think home cooks really know how to make it work and really know what works and what makes successful meals at home. And the health focus part, I mean, I don't know. It's just so tough having little kids in this food climate. I mean, as you know, that just how to navigate it all is really, really hard. And so I think the health focus part is that really my general philosophy is to serve a wide range of whole foods. That's it. I don't think you have to be fancy about it or get special ingredients from all across the world. I think if you're serving a range of whole foods, you're doing great. And that's not to say that my kids don't love ice cream and treats, and I think we have to be kind to ourselves as moms, knowing that if you go out to Oak Bluffs on a Saturday night and they want a Sunday, like, let's do it, we gotta figure out and empower them how to navigate this modern food system that we're all a part of. So health focus to me means in our home we eat whole foods. That's the majority of our diet that we shop for and cook and eat together, but I also want to empower them that they can kind of go out and be confident and enjoy the things they like too.
Okay, so we're going to come back to the recipes. First,
Yeah.
we're going to engage Liz in this conversation. Liz is a beautiful photographer, and the pictures in the book are stunning. They're for sale over there if you want to go see them. But, as I think a lot of us are amateur Instagrammers, and a lot of people post pictures of food, and they're awful. And I'm wondering, your pictures of food are beautiful. So I'm wondering if you want to give us, some tips on how to shoot food, and also tell us a little bit about the photos in this book and the models you used.
Okay. Maybe I'll borrow Sarah's.
Yeah, here.
Oh. Can you hear me okay? Well, first of all, just to speak to the book, when I met Sarah and we discussed creating the book, I think one of the parts that were really, the thing that was the most important was authenticity and keeping the book authentic to Sarah and to her family and their real life. So we shot everything at Sarah's home, in her kitchen, outside in her yard, and with her kids, without her kids. We kind of had a variety of setups, and we didn't ever force the kids because that doesn't really work. They have, times where they want to be involved and they don't want to be involved. So we had to respect that. And they were really good sports, and we had fun. We made it fun. They were in the kitchen doing the things that they normally do with Sarah. So that made it really easy. And we shot everything natural light, and we had, really bright sunny days and cloudy rainy days. And, when you're working like this, you just do your best to make it all happen. And we did, sometimes it was successful, sometimes not. Sometimes we had to redo something, but for the most part, it really worked. And we had fun doing it, which was the best part. And we became really good friends. So I think as far as Instagram photos and making your photos a little better, I would recommend shooting overhead is always really successful in terms of taking pictures with your phone and doing Instagram. Shooting high over the food is really successful. It's a really common way to shoot food. And natural light is always really great. Sometimes bright sunny light, if you have really something really colorful, it can really make the colors pop. And so that can be really fun and contrasty and sort of a different look than something in an open shade that's kind of soft. So it kind of depends what look you're going for. So I'd recommend doing that. And also keeping your arms a little bit in. Everyone tends to do this. And your arms can get a little shaky when you do that, if you're trying to hold still. So tuck them in a little bit. It can help you be still.
Okay, those are fantastic tips. Thank you. I think one of the great fun things and I know Kirsten is my co-author, and she's in our audience right now. Hi, Kirsten. When we did our cookbooks, the best part was eating the food afterwards. And it sounds like you guys did that also. And I can't tell you how many cookbooks that you see the photographs, and they're not real. There's a whole art, there's a whole science to making the food look good, and and you could not eat that food afterwards. You wouldn't want to eat it. So the fact that you guys shot pictures that are authentic and real, I think, says so much about it. Also, when you're cooking the recipe yourself at home, you want it to turn out kind of like you see in the pictures. And, a lot of cookbooks aren't, really truthful in the photographs. So I think
also
that's
want to add to that Elizabeth and I shot the book in real time. So we took a whole year to photograph it, and we started in winter just because that's when the project started. And we actually shot all the food and my family and I cooking together in each season, and I actually wrote all those recipes in that season on here. So I feel like we were all like totally immersed in that season. And then when the calendar moved along, we moved along with it. Because as you know, sometimes in cookbooks, depending on your schedule, you kind of have to fake that it's spring and winter or whatever. And I was really worried about that coming off as untrue. And at the heart of this book, something that I really want readers to come away with is it feeling authentic and real and something that you can relate to. And it's a real life inspiration to home cooks and busy parents. So I think she did a great job of making that come through in her photographs as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get to some tips, because I think everybody loves to come away with ideas of things that they can do. So I'm going to just toss a couple of questions to you. Number one is what are your go-to meals, and what are your tips for busy parents who are trying to get good, healthy food on the table during the night?
Well, the book outlines a ton of bulleted tips that are like really kind of game plan tips. But one thing that I say in the book that people are sometimes surprised by is I don't cook dinner every night. I only cook dinner like 4 nights a week. And then the other nights we'll have really simple things like rice and beans and kale, or egg sandwiches with salad, or, yogurt and granola and berries. Things that are whole foods that are just pulled from a well-stocked pantry and refrigerator. And for me, just in the phase of my life, imagining that I have to cook a meal from scratch every night is just unattainable. So I would encourage people to just ease up on your expectations of what family dinner means to you, and also what dinner food looks like. I consider a pot of rice and beans and garlicky kale a delicious dinner, and I think we just have to kind of shift our expectations of what that means. I also there's some little changes that I've made that have really impacted me. One of my friends is like, I'm too tired to cook dinner after work, and I'm like, well, don't cook dinner after work. That's not the time for you. If you're a morning or weekend person, you really have to find the time that works for you, and don't set yourself up for failure knowing that you're not a 6 o'clock dinner person. One small change I made for myself is usually I would do the family shopping on Sundays, and for some reason that just really bummed me out. I got grumpy, I missed my family time, and I made the shift to do all my shopping really early Monday morning, at 7 a.m. And for some reason that just completely changed my approach, my mood. But I think ultimately it's finding a sustainable strategy that works for you and your family, and often the mom is just feeling burnt out and kind of alone in the process. And so I really encourage people to call a family meeting and get together and be like, this is a group effort. This is important enough to figure it out as a team. But there's a lot of very specific planning, shopping, preparation tips in the book too that I hope people
Repurposing food is another way too. Is that you cook and then you repurpose it the next night. It ends up on a salad instead of as your main course. You also talk about picky eaters, and this is one of my favorite topics. And picky eaters in quotation marks.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. And we are right in sync on this. So I'm going to let you take over and explain what we're talking about.
Yeah. So if anyone was there yesterday, I kind of alluded to the point that in my parents' time or grandparents' time, picky eaters were not really a thing.
Did not exist.
And we're not talking about food allergies or sensitivities that are serious medical conditions, but we're talking about children who cannot participate in a family meal. And I think we could talk about this, the two of us, for hours and hours, but I think, we have this marketing system that have tried to convince Americans that kids can't eat real food. They can't eat food. They have to eat kid food. They have to eat colorful shapes that are out of a pouch covered in packaging. And that's just because they want you to buy that stuff. So that's not true. Kids can eat food. And I would argue that it's more important for them to be eating a wide range of whole foods than even for me, even though, of course, I do. So I think, again, in the book, there's very specific, like, kind of a game plan strategy that I use at home for picky eaters. But I think there's a few, thank you, picky eaters. I think there's a few kind of big ideas that I always try to remind myself of. And the first is that kids can eat real food, and you have to believe in them as humans, that they can do it. You know, they're not handicapped or in this way. And also that they really love to feel a part of it. And in our house, you know, this has changed over time as my children have gotten older, but if it's picking a recipe from a book, if it's shopping with me, if it's cooking, if it's setting the table, if it's hearing my husband and I talk about dinner and chiming in, feeling like they're part of the conversation, just buying into this process. And I'm not placing dinner in front of them and saying, eat it. They're saying, look what I made, like, try this, Mom, and we're all bought into it together. I think two other big points is that really kids really just want to be like us, and their older siblings and parents and grandparents and those who they look up to. So I encourage people also to look at themselves as role models with food, and how do you interact with those picky foods? What do you eat in front of your kids? How do you talk about food? Are you cooking? And that can be a hard thing sometimes, but they really are trying to model our behavior in a lot of ways. So I try to be conscious of what I'm eating and cooking in front of them. And I think also, as a young mom in this modern world, trying to navigate the busy schedules, the time we spend each week on all of these things that are important to my children. Like, my older son has chose to play hockey. We're not a hockey family, my husband and I, but this is something he loves. So we're going to do it. That's a big time commitment. And it's been really important to me to look at our weekly schedule with him and all of us as a family and say, how many hours a week are we spending on hockey versus how many hours a week are we spending on cooking and eating together? And those two things are as important, and if not eating together and cooking together and our family nutrition, more important than this. And we have to keep those in check, because it can be a slippery slope and have other priorities overtake food, when really that has to be at the top.
How many of your friends do you see having this philosophy or putting a priority on family dinner in your circle? I mean, her kids go to the Chilmark School right here, and I'm just wondering, are you an anomaly, or do you think that this is sort of the new wave?
Well, I think, the Vineyard's a special place. So I think there's a lot of like-minded families who live here. That said, I often show up to school pickup or at the library in the middle of winter in a tizzy, like, what are you making for dinner? I ask every person I see there. And so I think that conversation is not going away. We're all looking for each other for inspiration and support, or just saying, it is hard. Like, this is hard. You're not alone. Like, even if I'm an expert on this, it's hard, you know?
By the way, sweet potatoes, that's a dinner. And
totally.
You bake a sweet potato and, toss some things on top of it, and you've got dinner. Yeah. Liz, of all the things you could be taking pictures of, and I know you take, shots of people and stuff, but you're mainly focused right now on food. How did you come to choose that as your subject?
That's a hard question, but I guess my first foray into food was when Island Grown Initiative got the mobile chicken processing unit, and they came to the house that I was living at the time, and I photographed that whole process. And I met Allie Burlow, and I saw her maybe a few months later in the UPS store at the grocery store, and I mentioned to her that I took these photos, and she said, "Oh, I'd love to see them." And at the time I still shoot film, and at the time I was shooting film for that. And just because it was a personal interest, I grew up in a city, so it was, I hadn't lived here for that long, and so it was very intriguing to me. Somebody coming to your house and slaughtering your chickens for you. So
wait, this is unbelievable that you started taking beautiful food pictures from shooting slaughtered chickens.
Yes.
Like that's,
Yes.
I had no idea that was going to be your answer. So I'm glad I asked the question.
So I showed Allie, and she said, "I love them, and I'm starting a food magazine." So that was the beginning of Edible Vineyard, and she asked me to jump on board. And we had a very similar aesthetic and interests, and we just really hit it off. And so that was my first foray into food. So
Amazing. Okay, last question. I think we've got like 5 minutes left, and I'd love for you to do a little dive into the book and tell us some of your favorite recipes.
Okay.
And tease those out a little bit so people are just salivating and go running over to the tent and buy a copy of this beautiful book, Feeding a Family.
Well, I think like any home cook, my favorite recipes are those that are successful in my house, like my kids' favorites. And so our older son, Dylan, who's 7, is a chocoholic, and it's like a real thing. I didn't know that that's a thing. Like, he is a chocoholic. And so I love to come up with, chocolate recipes that he loves that I feel confident in him eating a lot of quantities of. So specifically in the book, there's a chocolate mint milkshake that uses fresh mint leaves, unsweetened cocoa powder, frozen banana. You can use any kind of milk you like, cow milk, nut milk. And it just is so delicious, and it's creamy, and he loves it, and it feels special, and he can make it himself because it's just in a blender. And that just it takes 3 minutes. So I feel like that is a completely successful project. But what I really love about how this book is organized is that it's organized by season. Each season has 10 dinner menus, and the menus can be anything from like a 1-pot dinner to something with a side and dessert, because I'm a type of person who brings cookbooks into bed and dives into them. But a pet peeve I have is when I find one side or something I like, but then I don't know what to make with it, and then I get tired and forget about it. So I want someone to be make this with this. And so that's put the whole thing there. But in each season, there's one Sunday dinner. That's kind of a longer, more family-involved process, not one of those quick weeknight situations. And some of those are really my favorites because often they're recipes that my husband's made because he's kind of our Sunday cook. And they're just really remind me of our family right now.
Oh, that's great. There's one very unusual recipe, I should say, that's in this book that features a lot of healthy food, and that's a recipe for marshmallows.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So, what child doesn't want to just gouge themselves with marshmallows? And so this winter, as you can imagine, the winter on Martha's Vineyard, you kind of have to invent things to do to occupy your time. And we have a little literally a pit dug in our backyard that we have fires in, and just when the sun sets at 4:30 and you are feeling some seasonal depression, we can go outside and be outside. And so my boys obviously were let's roast marshmallows. And so I developed this recipe, and they're made of honey and water and a little gelatin, and it's as much a science experiment as it is a Whole Foods sweet. It works perfectly. You do get a fluffy, sweet marshmallow at the end, but it's really fun to make with kids too, because you do it in a stand mixer, and it just it becomes this other, it looks like a living creature. So it's also a really fun winter and obviously summer activity.
Great. All right, those recipes and more. Do you have something you want to add?
We have a time for a few questions. I
Hey.
also just wanted to say one quick thing, in that I don't have a family other than myself and my husband, and I cook from Sarah's book all the time. So it's not just for families with kids. It's for busy people, and we love the recipes, and that there is one more option. Sarah offers options, so you make the one thing, and then the next night you can eat it a different way. So I cook from it a lot, and I love it.
Thanks.
Good testimonial. All right, any questions out there in our audience? Kirsten, yay! Bring her the microphone. Kirsten is an incredible cook.
Softly
Incredible, I
spoken
just want to say.
I know that after writing a cookbook, you never want to see those recipes again, at least for a while, and you certainly don't want to eat them. But after, how long has it been since you wrote it?
So it took us 2 years. Yeah.
So it's been a while now.
Yeah.
So what are the 2 recipes you look back on and you really want to cook and you really love, and can you describe them and how you make them?
Well, we honestly still eat these recipes like weekly. I don't know if that's good or bad. But the things that I feel like I just keep going back to are actually on the cover here, these little flatbread pizzas. So the story behind these is we make pizza, homemade pizza a lot at our house, and we wanted to make pizza in the summer. But the way we do it at our house is we put the broiler on. And I just we don't have AC, and I couldn't bring myself to do that in the summer. So instead of doing that, I experimented with just putting the dough on like a pancake griddle for like a few minutes on either side, and then topping it with like pesto and just like raw toppings. And we make that probably once a week for dinner, because you can make your own. We make them individual. It's literally like a flatbread on the stovetop. You can do it on a outside grill. But we do that all the time. And a winter recipe, which is a banana milk shake, which has like cinnamon, vanilla, banana, milk. My almost 4-year-old has like every morning when he wakes up, he's like, I want my milkshake. That's what he says. And if someone heard him, they'd be like, well, she's giving him milkshakes every morning. This is a little intense. But it's really a banana, whatever milk we have around, cow milk, almond milk, hemp milk, cinnamon, vanilla, and he like chugs it, and he's a big, voluptuous, delicious baby.
Any other questions? Now's your chance. Here we go over here. Thank you.
And one more after this.
Thank you. This is probably more of a request. I looked at your cookbook. I think it's wonderful. I think it has great ideas. I am now a hockey mom of a teenager who's anti-sugar, not going to eat the fruit, protein all the way.
Yep.
Can't get him to sit down at a table. I don't have the supportive Chilmark community you do. I have
Right.
the crazy hockey moms around me.
Yeah.
I was looking at how I can modify things. I could do the flatbread pizza and have him eat them cold as he's, in the car going to practice.
Sure.
But if you ever venture into the hockey mom cookbook,
I think I'll be there in a few years. So are you kind of craving more on the go eating?
I have to get him to believe again. We were doing really well.
Yeah.
And then he gets that in that environment that's drinking the protein shakes and eating the protein bars.
Yeah.
And, I can't get him to eat anything for breakfast.
Yeah.
He's at school until 12:30 before he even puts anything in his body, and he's all his substantive classes. And then school feeds him, cheese ravioli with Alfredo sauce and French fries. And then he's supposed to go on the athletic field and perform.
Right. So I think I have a couple of suggestions. One is maybe trying to find people who he looks up to that can kind of help in your cause. I mean, sometimes having it come from your parents is harder. So maybe if there's coaches or older players who he looks up to, or cousins or uncles who can kind of be a new voice in the conversation, I think that helps sometimes. But I also feel like, we're really busy. I think there's a lot of grab and go stuff that you could have on hand. I love Lara bars. It is a packaged bar, but it only has nuts, dates, and like either dried coconut or dried blueberries. And again, it's just hard to navigate that market. I think you can make a lot of smoothies ahead of time, put them in mason jars, knowing that there is protein in there. You can use nut butters, you can use coconut milk for like really healthy fat. You can do tons of stuff and have them ready for him to go. You can make like baking sheets of eggs, so you can kind of like cut out a frittata to go. Put, if he's like a meat lover, like you said, bacon, potatoes, like loaded up. And so I think just keeping it simple, but having maybe those grab and go items that are full of the things he likes, but know that they're good stuff.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for
everybody.
coming. Have a great
Bye.
day.